Good morning, I'm Juliet and welcome to Healing Water Sanctuary. I'm here this morning to tell you about a very special event and a very special person that is here at the sanctuary that I would like to introduce to you. And please come in. Welcome, Julia, to share with our lovely viewers today about what we're doing. So we're here to tell you about our workshop. It's called Healing Our Birth Wounds, Healing Our Lives, and it's a prenatal trauma resolution process workshop. So by process we mean that we're going to take you into an experience that you're going to work with and process and come at the end of it feeling better. So Julia, can you tell us a little bit about what prenatal work is?
Well, yes, prenatal work is around exploring our early imprints that have come from our birth, from pregnancy or even earlier, and these imprints continue to have an effect on the rest of our lives. Whenever there's something in our lives that on some level reminds our subconscious of the initial incident, if there's some unresolved emotions or trauma from that initial incident, then what's happening in our actual life is found as more of a challenge and is more likely to put us into overwhelm. But then when we've done the work to heal and resolve and integrate these initial traumas, then when we find challenges in our lives we have many more options for dealing with it.
Yeah, so it seems very strange that very early events in our lives can actually be remembered, but they are there in our psyche and in our body memory, and both Julia and I have worked very extensively on a one-to-one basis with clients suffering from trauma, and the trauma that happens at prenatal times is really no different in the way it overwhelms our system, and actually it is those first primary wounds that can actually cause the most damage and then set up the pathway for other later traumas like traumatic relationships or accidents or other things to happen, and it keeps recycling in our lives. So it's quite worthwhile to go back to the very roots of it, which can be as early as, what's the earliest event you think that?
Well, many people have experienced even the earliest experience that they perceive as leaving source. So that very first leaving a place where they felt one with everything can trigger masses of grief or guilt for leaving.
Yeah, so it's incredible to think that we can access the time when we actually came into our physical bodies. Actually, Julia, that was when I did my training, when I was working on this, it was the leaving source. It was actually coming in at the very point of embodiment that left the most shock in my body. And that underpins all the later events in my life. So I don't know if you've experienced something like that.
Yes, I mean that is commonly the case, but most people when they very first do this work, it's a birth imprint that arises. So like if you're born by forceps or born by cesarean or your labour was induced, those imprints are very profound, and that's what's most likely to arise in an early session.
Yeah, so the birth issues are probably the first ones to clear, how traumatic our births were. Now when people think about going back and doing this work, and there might be a fear, oh, this is going to be too overwhelming, I know that my birth was difficult, I don't want to go there, it's too frightening, too terrifying, it might stress me too much. So, you know, how do we avoid that? How do we avoid that possibility of it all being too much?
Well, you have to trust your intuition. if you absolutely don't want to do it, obviously don't feel forced to come along and do this work.
No, absolutely not.
Or because your partner's told you you should come. You need to feel the impulse to do it, and at the same time it's normal to feel a bit scared beforehand. However, once you're actually doing the work, we're holding a safe container and we'll encourage you to just dip in and out of the uncomfortable feelings, and at the same time as you're doing that, you will have a witness of the adult part of yourself as well, which obviously is different to when you very first experience these uncomfortable emotions and sensations. When you were a little one, you were completely overwhelmed by the experience, which is why it hasn't been integrated, and which is why you might be feeling called to look at it now.
Yeah, so there's this process called titration, I believe, where you can actually, because you're functioning actually from the place of your witness and actually guided by your psyche or your soul, you're actually being able to choose which parts you're going to work with, and that your soul or psyche will only bring up what is appropriate, what it knows that you can actually deal with in that point of time, so that you're able to work with it. But also within the workshop there's this thing called titration. So what is titration?
Well, titration is when you dip into an uncomfortable experience, and then without getting overwhelmed by it, then you come back to a place where you can feel some type of resource. It might be a physical resource of the person who's supporting you or something else, and then just by dipping in and coming out, you're able to resolve the original trauma without becoming overwhelmed with the pain and discomfort, until eventually you can go in there and find that there's just the story there without the pain, without the contraction.
And then the next step is through working with that you can actually heal the original story. You can change, you can even repattern. You could even consciously choose to repattern of how your birth or your experience was, which frees up a lot of energy in the psyche, so that the pattern's not repeating in your life. The other thing that people might ask about the workshop is the confidentiality and safety and so on. So what's your experience of that, Juliet?
Well, of course it is completely confidential, so everything that anyone brings to the group stays in the room, doesn't get talked about outside of it. That's paramount importance.
And to say that the group is very small, it's a maximum of 6, so that we have a very focused, very safely held space. Yes, a lot of time for each person to really tenderly support you through your process, through your experience, and help you to go away feeling really resourced at the end, that you've really done something very worthwhile that's going to take you to a different place in your life. What else do we need to tell people about? Do you know? The date?
The date, 2nd and 3rd of March.
Okay, and the place is at Healing Water Sanctuary. There's a lot of information that's underneath this video to tell you, other things that you need in order to go ahead and book. Were there other things? Now my mind has just gone blank. I don't know, but I just want to share that I really love this work. I've done a lot of it, and it has helped me so much personally in my life. That's why I'm so committed to doing this, and I've seen a lot of healing, a huge amount of healing from people that have done the work as well. Oh, and that was the other thing I want to say. Julia's actually a midwife, amongst other things, so she has a lot of actual hands-on experience with helping women give birth. So she knows the experience from both sides, both from the psychotherapeutic approach and the process work, but actually the hands-on, what is actually involved in childbirth. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you want to say a little bit about women giving birth? And
well, the most important thing when women are giving birth is to acknowledge the baby as a conscious participant. So whatever the actual birth outcome, even if it is a cesarean, if you're including the baby in the experience and telling the baby what's happening and why, then there's so much less of a traumatic imprint on that little one.
yes, yes. And I suppose in the process work, that's also what we're doing. We're including the baby, us, for the first time in a conscious participation in our birthing experiences.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why it's healing.
Mm.
Okay, thank you so much, Juliet. I so
You're
look
very
forward
welcome.
to doing this with you. I'm so excited about it.
Me
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Me too.
good. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.